She never imagined her last moments on Earth would begin with a flash of light. One heartbeat ago, Flight 508 was gliding peacefully over the rainforest, passengers settling into their seats, exchanging smiles, drifting into sleep. And then, nature struck with a rage no human could predict. A blinding lightning bolt ripped through the sky and slammed into the aircraft with the force of a bomb. The cabin lights exploded, alarms screamed, and in an instant, calm became terror. People clutched their loved ones. The plane shuddered violently, and the sound of tearing metal drowned out the cries rising from every corner of the cabin. 17-year-old Julianne Kepka felt the world fall apart around her. She didn't fully understand what was happening, only that the floor beneath her feet was no longer a floor, the plane was no longer a plane, and gravity had claimed her without mercy. A brutal gust of wind sucked her out into the open sky. No parachute, no safety, no time. Just her, strapped to her seat, plummeting through a storm so fierce it felt alive. Rain slapped her face like needles, the wind roared in her ears, and flaming pieces of the aircraft spun wildly around her like falling stars. Most people do not survive a fall from 10,000 feet. Most people do not even have time to scream. But somehow, she did not die. When she crashed into the Amazon canopy, branches snapped beneath her like bones breaking in the dark. They slowed her fall just enough. The forest floor rose to meet her with brutal force, and then everything went silent. Hours later, as the storm eased and daylight seeped through the trees, she opened her eyes. Her body throbbed with pain, broken collarbone, deep cuts, one shoe missing, but she was alive. Alive in the middle of the deadliest rainforest on Earth. Alive when everyone else on Flight 508 was gone. Confused, dizzy, alone, she called out for her mother. Only the jungle answered. The Amazon swallowed the wreckage, the bodies, the screams. But it did not swallow her. She was just a girl, injured, terrified, stranded in a green hell with no food, no map, and no guarantee that rescue would ever come. Yet she stood up, trembling, and took her first step into a nightmare that would become one of the most unbelievable survival stories in human history. She fell from the sky and lived. The morning of December 24th began like any other holiday travel day. Crowded terminals, excited families, and the warm anticipation of reaching home. At Lima Airport, passengers of Flight 508 boarded the Lanza aircraft with smiles, gifts, and luggage packed with Christmas memories yet to be made. Among them was 17-year-old Julianne Kepka, traveling with her mother, Maria. She carried a simple backpack and a quiet excitement, unaware that she was walking toward the most defining moment of her life. Inside the plane, everything felt normal. Flight attendants greeted passengers with practiced smiles, people settled into their seats, and the engines hummed with their familiar, comforting roar. Julianne leaned back, looking out the window at a sky that seemed perfectly harmless, clouds stretching endlessly over the Peruvian rainforest below. But as the aircraft climbed, the atmosphere shifted. The bright sky dimmed, clouds thickened and swallowed the wings. The wind began to churn like something alive. A soft bump shook the plane, then another. A few passengers exchanged nervous glances, but turbulence was nothing new. The pilots pushed forward, unaware of the monstrous storm forming ahead. Within minutes, the turbulence escalated. Overhead bins rattled, drinks spilled. A baby started crying. Outside, lightning stitched across the sky in jagged white flashes. The plane was entering a storm so violent that even seasoned pilots would have turned back, if they had seen it in time. Julianne held her mother's hand, her heartbeat quickening as the cabin lights flickered. The captain's voice tried to sound calm as it came through the intercom, but the static and shaking made every word feel uncertain. The aircraft plunged suddenly, drawing gasps across the cabin. Someone prayed aloud. Someone else cried out for help. The smell of fear spread quickly, mixing with the scent of wet metal and the cold air blowing through the vents. Then, without warning, the sky exploded. A bolt of lightning, massive, bright, violent, struck the right wing of Flight 508. The impact was like a bomb going off mid-air. A blinding white flash flooded the cabin. Metal shrieked. The wing burst into flames. Oxygen masks dropped violently. Luggage flew from the overhead compartments. A wave of panic overtook the passengers, their screams echoing over the roar of the burning engine. The plane tilted sharply. It shook as if every bolt were coming loose. Smoke began to fill the cabin. Flight attendants tried shouting instructions, but the chaos drowned out their voices. People were crying, praying, shouting names of loved ones. Everything was happening too fast. The aircraft was losing control. Julianne clung to her mother's arm. She could feel the heat from the fire, the smell of burning metal, the crushing unpredictability of the storm. Her mother whispered something to calm her, but the next explosion cut her sentence in half. The fuselage cracked. Pieces of the plane, large, heavy chunks, began tearing away into the sky. And then came the moment no one could have prepared for. The aircraft broke apart. A deafening roar filled the cabin as the floor ripped open, exposing the violent storm beneath them. Passengers were sucked out, seats spinning wildly into the open air. The pressure difference was unbearable, the force unstoppable. Julianne felt her seat break free. She didn't scream. There wasn't time. In a split second, she was thrown out of the aircraft, still strapped to her seat, falling through a raging storm at 10,000 feet. Wind slapped her face so hard she could barely breathe. Flames and debris flew past her. The world above her disintegrated into fire and metal. The world below was a blur of green and darkness. For a brief moment, suspended in the chaos of the storm, Julianne's consciousness flickered. The last thing she saw was the jungle rising toward her like an endless ocean of trees. The sound disappeared. The world went black. Flight 508 vanished into the Amazon. And Julianne Koepke began the most unimaginable fall a human can survive. Wind roared like a living monster as Julianne plummeted through the sky. She was barely conscious, drifting somewhere between shock and darkness. Her mind could not understand what had just happened. There had been a plane, her mother, passengers, a storm, and now there was nothing but open air swallowing her whole. Strapped into her seat, she spun violently as gravity dragged her downward. Cold rain slapped her skin. The storm clouds around her flashed with angry lightning, illuminating chunks of burning debris falling alongside her, pieces of Flight 508 falling like dying stars. She could not scream. She could not breathe. The fall was so fast, so brutal, that her body shut down in self-defense. For a moment, the world slowed. Her vision blurred. Her mind floated. She drifted in and out of consciousness as if falling through a dream. And then the jungle appeared below her, an endless, rippling carpet of green. But this green was not soft. It was dense, unforgiving, a world of tall trees armed with branches that could impale or crush anything that entered at speed. But it was also her only chance. As her seat plummeted into the canopy, the jungle reached up, not to welcome her, but to break her. Thick branches snapped beneath her, whiplashing her body, each strike slowing her descent by the smallest fraction. The seat spun, twisted, jerked as limbs of trees cracked around her. It was not a gentle landing. Far from it. It was a brutal, violent collision with nature, but each branch absorbed a portion of the fatal impact. And then, silence. She hit the forest floor with a dull, heavy thud, the kind of impact that should end a life instantly. But incredibly, she survived. Hours passed before she opened her eyes. Sunlight filtered through gaps in the canopy above. The storm had moved on, leaving the air thick and humid. For a moment, Julianne didn't know where she was. She tried to sit up, but pain shot through her body in sharp waves. Her left eye was swollen shut. Her collarbone was broken. Her arm was deeply cut. Her legs were bruised and bleeding. Her body felt shattered, but she was breathing. She called out for her mother. Her voice cracked in the heavy jungle air. "Mom! Mom!" Only the buzz of insects answered. The realization washed over her slowly, painfully. The plane crash wasn't a nightmare. It had happened, and she was alone. She unclipped herself from the seat and tried to stand, but her legs trembled under her weight. She took a step. Pain ripped through her spine. She forced herself to keep going, driven by instinct rather than strength. Around her, the jungle stretched in every direction. Thick vines, towering trees, a ground covered in damp leaves and hidden threats. The forest was alive with sounds she couldn't recognize, distant screeches, rustling, something moving through the underbrush. Every noise made her heart race. Her vision was blurry, her head throbbed, but she had to move. She searched the surrounding crash area. Debris was scattered, small pieces of metal, scraps of luggage, torn fabric, no large wreckage, no survivors. Just silence. Then she found a small plastic bag. Inside were just a few pieces of candy, barely enough calories to last a day. But for now, it was all she had. She ate one piece slowly, saving the rest. The sweetness felt like hope on her tongue. Night began to fall, and with it came a terrifying new reality. The Amazon rainforest transforms after dark into something far more dangerous. Mosquitoes swarmed relentlessly. The air grew colder. Strange, unidentifiable sounds echoed through the trees. Her fear grew with every passing second. With no shelter, no fire, and no way to protect herself, Julianne curled up under a small tree, using leaves to cover herself. Sleep came in broken moments, interrupted by pain, hunger, and fear. She cried quietly, her tears mixing with the damp earth beneath her. She survived the fall. But the jungle? That was an entirely different battle. When the morning sun rose, Julianne stood slowly, her body trembling. She had only one choice. She had to walk. She had to find help. She had to survive. Barely alive, she took her first step into the heart of the Amazon, toward a journey that would push her beyond human limits. Morning light filtered through the canopy like thin golden blades, cutting through the darkness that had swallowed Julianne the night before. She woke shivering, drenched in dew, her body stiff and aching. Every breath hurt. Every movement felt like tearing muscle and broken bone. But she was alive, and in the deadly Amazon rainforest, being alive meant she had to move. As she pushed herself up, the true scale of her situation came into focus. The forest was not a peaceful place. It was dense, endless, almost suffocating in its presence. Giant trees towered above her like silent giants. Vines twisted around trunks like serpents. Strange insects crawled across the leaves. The air was thick, wet, heavy, and filled with the smell of soil, rot, and vegetation. Julianne realized something crucial. She was in one of the most dangerous jungles on Earth, alone, injured, and with no supplies beyond a few pieces of candy. But she wasn't entirely helpless. Her parents, both biologists, had raised her with knowledge most 17-year-olds didn't have. They had taught her how life worked in the rainforest, how water could guide you, how to spot dangers, and how to stay calm when everything around you screamed fear. She took a slow breath and searched for water, a trickle, a sound, anything. Then she heard it, a faint gurgling, hidden beneath the buzz of insects. A stream. Her heart lifted. Her father always told her, "If you're lost in the forest, follow water. It will lead you to people." Still weak, she pushed through the undergrowth, slipping on mud, grabbing tree trunks for balance. Vines snagged her clothes, thorny branches cut her skin. Every step was a battle. But after minutes of struggling, she found it, a narrow, shallow stream winding through the jungle like a silver thread. Relief washed over her. She knelt beside it and cupped the water in her hands. It was dirty, full of soil, but she had no choice. She drank. The gritty water tasted like life. She followed the stream, moving slowly, cautiously. Hours passed. The sun climbed high and scorched the jungle floor, turning the humidity into a suffocating blanket. Sweat dripped down her face. Her injuries burned with every step. Her left eye remained swollen, giving her only half the world to see. Then she saw something that shattered her hope. A part of the wreckage. A seat. Torn luggage. A shoe. And near it, a body. Her heart dropped. It was a passenger, someone she had seen on the plane. The sight stopped her in her tracks. She tried to look away, but the reality of what had happened flooded back. She trembled. Tears welled in her good eye. She whispered a soft apology to the silent figure and forced herself to keep walking. But the jungle was relentless. It stabbed. It scratched. It tired her until every breath felt like a struggle. Hours later, as the shadows lengthened, the insects grew louder. Mosquitoes swarmed her, biting any exposed skin. Her hands, face, and legs turned red with welts. She slapped at them, but it was useless. There were thousands. The jungle had no mercy. On the second night, she curled beside the stream. She didn't sleep much. Cold seeped into her bones. Strange screeches echoed. A branch cracked somewhere nearby. She froze. Was it a jaguar? A wild boar? Or just the forest playing tricks on her exhausted mind? She didn't want to find out. When daylight returned, she was weaker than before. Hunger gnawed at her stomach. The candies were almost gone. Her wounds were beginning to rot. Flies circled the gashes on her arms and legs. Her collarbone throbbed with every move. Still, she walked. The stream widened slightly, encouraging her to continue. Sometimes she waded through it, letting the cool water numb her pain. Sometimes she crawled along the bank when her legs refused to hold her. Then came the worst moment yet. She found more bodies. 3 people still strapped to their row of seats, wedged between fallen trees, their clothes torn, their faces still. She recognized one of them, a woman who had smiled at her during boarding. Julianne collapsed to her knees. Her voice shook as she whispered, "Please, please let Mom be alive." But the rainforest remained silent. She stood again. Her tears mixed with the rain as she forced herself forward. She survived the fall. She endured the jungle's cruelty. But the true test, finding help, was still far away, and the rainforest was only getting darker. Julianne had been walking for days, though time in the Amazon passed strangely. Hours melted into each other, and every moment felt suspended between life and death. The sun rose and fell behind thick clouds, the jungle swallowing daylight faster than her exhausted mind could track. She no longer knew what day it was. She only knew she must keep moving. Her stream had widened into a small river, its sound becoming a constant companion. Sometimes, when her legs trembled too violently to stand, she walked directly in the water. Her father had once told her that streams often led to civilization, and that snakes, jaguars, and dangerous insects preferred the forest floor to moving water. In the river, she felt safer, even though piranhas and stingrays lurked below. But fear of what lurked on land pushed her forward. Her body deteriorated a little more each day. Her wounds swelled, her lips cracked. Her skin peeled from the sun and rain. Flies laid eggs in the gashes on her arms. She could feel them wriggling under her skin, alive. The realization made her gag, but she had no energy to panic. She tried to remove them, pressing, scraping, pulling, but the pain was unbearable. The larvae stayed, feeding on her flesh. She knew infections in the Amazon were deadly. She forced herself to keep calm. Each night, The jungle seemed louder. Frogs croaked like engines. Insects shrieked. The rustle of leaves felt like whispers in the dark. In moments of overwhelming fear, she whispered to herself, repeating phrases her mother used to say, "Keep going. Don't stop. Don't give up." It was the only comfort she had left. On the fourth or fifth day, she wasn't sure which, it rained for hours. The downpour drenched her, turning the river into a muddy current. She drank rainwater directly from leaves. She stumbled, slipped, crawled. Every step was a battle inside an endless green maze. Her mind started to drift. Voices, shadows, memories mixing with the present. Sometimes she thought she heard her mother calling her name. Sometimes she saw flashes of the plane falling again. Sometimes she imagined rescuers reaching out their hands, only to blink and find nothing but jungle. By the seventh day, hunger became a cruel companion. The candies were gone. Her stomach twisted painfully. She tried to eat seeds and leaves but spat them out. They were too bitter, possibly poisonous. She couldn't risk it. The Amazon was alive with life, yet provided her nothing she could eat. By the eighth day, her strength was draining faster than she could walk. Her legs trembled constantly. Her vision blurred. Her heart thumped irregularly. She felt herself fading. She collapsed more often now, sometimes for minutes, sometimes hours. Each time she hit the ground, she wondered if this would be the place she died. But something inside her refused to stop. Her parents' voices, her will to survive, the echo of who she was, they kept pushing her forward. On the 10th day, something changed. The river widened noticeably. The water was deeper, calmer, more like a real waterway. She felt a small surge of hope. This meant she was getting closer, closer to people, closer to the outskirts of the forest, closer to civilization, or at least a sign of it. Then she saw it. A boat. A small, worn wooden boat pulled up on the bank of the river. At first, she thought it was a hallucination. She blinked, rubbed her blurry eye, stared again. It was real. Her voice cracked as she cried out, "Hello? Is anyone here?" Silence. She walked toward the boat, her steps unsteady. Nearby was a small path leading from the river into the forest. She followed it, praying for a miracle. And then she saw something even more unbelievable. A tiny hut. A real structure. A man-made shelter. Proof that someone had been here. She approached it slowly, afraid it would disappear like the visions she'd been seeing all week. But the door frame was real beneath her fingers. Inside, she found a small fire pit, tools, and gasoline. The gasoline was the key. Her father once taught her that gasoline can force maggots out of wounds. With shaking hands, she poured it over her infected cuts. The pain was excruciating, blinding, burning, unbearable, but the larvae floated to the surface and dropped out. She sobbed. From pain, from relief, from the realization that she was still fighting. She curled up inside the hut. For the first time in 11 days, she felt sheltered. Safe, or at least safer than the jungle outside. But she wasn't rescued yet. Not yet. The sky was calm, almost too calm. Julian didn't know that within minutes, the same sky would rip itself apart and drop her 10,000 feet toward death. As she leaned back in her seat, listening to the soft hum of the aircraft, everything still felt normal. Until it didn't. A sudden explosion ripped through the cabin, so violent that it drowned out every scream, every heartbeat, every thought. The plane shook like a dying beast, metal tearing, luggage flying, passengers praying, crying, holding on to anything that wasn't already ripped away. Julian felt the world tilt, the cabin cracking open like an eggshell smashed by a giant hand. Then came the moment she would never forget. The seat beneath her tore free, and she was thrown into pure, roaring nothingness. She wasn't falling. She was being dragged downward, swallowed by the sky itself. Wind blasted her face, thunder boomed in the distance, and the world spun so violently she couldn't tell up from down. But one thing was certain. She was alive. For now. At 10,000 feet, death should have been instant. No parachute, no protection, just a fragile human body against the wrath of gravity. But Julianne wasn't falling straight down. She was spinning with her seat, and the thick jungle canopy below waited like a massive green net. Branches slammed into her, slowed her, shredded her clothes, cut her skin. But they also saved her life. The forest broke her fall, reducing a death sentence to a miracle. When she opened her eyes, she wasn't sure if she was alive or trapped in some strange dream. Her body was bruised, bleeding, disoriented. She could barely stand. Her right eye was swollen shut. Her shoulder burned. Her head throbbed like it had been struck with a hammer. But she was breathing, and she was alone. The jungle towered above her, humid, ancient, filled with sounds she didn't recognize. The crash site was nowhere in sight. No humans, no help, no footprints, nothing but endless green and the distant call of unseen animals. Most people would have given up. But Julianne wasn't most people. She remembered her father's lessons. If you ever get lost in the jungle, find water. Follow it. Water always leads somewhere. So she limped forward, pushing through vines, mud, insects, and exhaustion. The jungle wasn't just a forest. It was a living maze designed to break the weak. She slipped, stumbled, and screamed silently as ants crawled into her wounds. Every step felt like a war. Every minute felt like an hour. Every breath tasted like fear. But she kept walking. She found a small stream and followed it. Days passed. She drank dirty water, ate nothing, slept on damp ground. Thunderstorms drenched her like the jungle was trying to wash her away. At night, she curled up and prayed the buzzing around her wasn't from insects that could kill. On the 9th day, when she had almost lost the strength to continue, she heard it. The faint sound of a boat engine. Hope. Real hope. She waved. She cried. She stumbled out of the bushes looking like a ghost of a girl who had survived the impossible. And the men on the boat stared at her as if she had returned from the dead. Because in many ways, she had. Julianne Köpke became the girl who fell 10,000 feet and lived. A miracle. A legend. A survivor written into history. News of the jungle men carrying a half-dead teenage girl spread like wildfire through the nearby village. A foreign face, torn clothes, bruised skin, eyes filled with exhaustion but still burning with life. No one could believe she had emerged from the heart of the Amazon alone. When Julianne finally reached the small medical outpost, the room fell silent. A doctor stepped forward, expecting to treat another snakebite, another fever case. But then he saw her injuries, deep cuts, severe bruising, infected wounds, and he asked the question everyone was thinking. How did you survive? Julianne took a shaky breath and whispered, I fell. From the sky. Those 6 words froze everyone. They stared, trying to make sense of it. But as she slowly shared her story, confusion turned to disbelief. And disbelief turned into awe. A girl had fallen 10,000 feet without a parachute, crashed through the canopy, and walked through the Amazon for 11 days, surviving storms, hunger, insects, and the crushing loneliness of the jungle. The odds weren't 1 in a million, they were 1 in a billion. Within hours, the news reached the nearest city. Reporters rushed to the jungle airstrip. Helicopters arrived. Interview requests flooded in. Scientists couldn't explain it. Survival experts called it a mathematically impossible event. But Julianne wasn't chasing fame. She wanted one thing, to find the bodies of the passengers and her mother. The next morning, Julianne, still weak, her wounds freshly cleaned, boarded a rescue helicopter and guided them toward the crash site. She knew the direction. She had walked it. She had lived through it. When the helicopter hovered above the wreckage, the rescuers were speechless. The plane was nothing but twisted metal and scattered debris. The jungle had swallowed everything except tragedy. But Julianne didn't cry. She just stared, silent and unmoving, as if the moment had frozen her heart. Later, rescuers confirmed her mother hadn't survived. It was a loss Julianne carried quietly, but it never drowned her spirit. Instead, it became the foundation of her strength. As weeks passed, the world called her the girl who lived, the miracle survivor, the one in a billion. Books were written. Documentaries were made. Scientists studied her case. Pilots shared her story as a symbol of hope whenever fear overtook passengers. But behind all the headlines was simply a girl, brave, determined, and stronger than she ever knew. Years later, Julianne became a biologist, dedicating her life to the Amazon rainforest, the same jungle that tried to kill her, and the same jungle that saved her. She never saw it as her enemy. She saw it as a teacher. Her story wasn't just about surviving a fall. It was about surviving everything after the fall. Her journey proved something powerful. Sometimes the world breaks you, just to show you how unbreakable you truly are. And for the rest of her life, Julianne carried one truth. I shouldn't have survived, but I did. That means I must live for something bigger than myself. A miracle girl, a lone survivor, a legend written in the sky and the soil of the Amazon.